Every once in a while, I get asked by kindly curious internet strangers the dreaded question, how do you draw the comics? Let me make it absolutely clear. I don't dread it because it's a bad question. I dread it because I, like any other artist, suspect my process is nothing more than a whole lot of bullshit dressed up in a rip-off business suit. But that's besides the point. You guys keep asking, so I figured it's time I make this official. Here it is, the video of how I make comics. Who the hell am I, anyway? Oh yeah, that's me. I'm Chekhov, and I make Steven Universe fan comics. Okay, actually, I make one Steven Universe fan comic, the one where Steven Universe is the son of White Diamond instead of Rose. It's kind of big, literally. It's on its 4th season. Actually, just finished its 4th season. Check it out and read it yourself. You've got the means. We're here for something only tangentially related. Process. In truth, the answer to the question, what is your process for making comics, is shockingly simple. I sketch, I slap down panels, I put down some bubbles, I line art, I add values, I add background values, I add sparkles, I add sparkles, I add sparkles. But that sort of reply may feel flat. I'm guessing what you guys really want to know is how I come up with the comics from conception to completion. And that's more fun, so let's dive right into it. Concept. Here's another question I get asked a lot.
Where do you get your ideas?
The answer is, I don't know. Ideas aren't something I actively search for or think about. I'm not the hunter in this scenario, I'm the hunted, the prey, the victim, if you will. The victim of what exactly? An idea hit and run, that's what. Ideas don't just sit around waiting to be thought of, but neither are they naturally occurring in a vacuum. If you live long enough, if you read enough interesting stories and enough fun comic books, if you watch enough interesting movies, and hell, if you go outside often enough to have your own wacky adventures in the wilderness, you too can be the victim of ideas. However, they're not all good ideas. Most ideas are kinda bad, but actually that's okay, because quantity breeds quality. We'll get back to this part later. When I started this comic, I also started a blog on Tumblr. Tumblr is this website that allows people to, among other things, ask you questions. Namely, it allows you to pretend to be a character and answer those questions in character, using comics. So that's what I did. The Tumblr I ran for White Diamond Steven AU gets a lot of these questions. A lot. Many of them are fun, but would likely murder the plot of the story in a one-kill shot by unwrapping all of the plot points with the elegance of a kitten in a yarn store, so I don't typically save those. Instead, I comb through the weeds for the plot-relevant, interesting questions, and I shove them in the drafts box in the manner that probably resembles the Cask of Amontillato's plot. I'm sure I'll draw a comic and reply to this one someday. Much as I appreciate the asks that frame the comics, they don't actually create the plot from scratch. In fact, they're more like a framework for me to accomplish what I've set out to do. And that is the plot. The plot. Let's get one thing straight here. I knew what the ending of White Diamond AU was years ago. I came up with an ending to this entire comic back when Season 1 was posting. I knew what the final chapter would be. It's set. It's done. But that's just the destination. What is really important is the journey, how we get there, and that is much more malleable. Contrary to popular belief, asks cannot make me change a storyline. They can influence how we get there to an extent, but not much else. Season 1 was going towards Beach City. Season 2 was going towards Earl meeting the gems and revealing inadvertently who Steven was. Season 3 careened towards bringing the crystal gems back together as a unit for the return, and Season 4 was largely about realizations and choices. When I write the plot, I rarely write the plot. I usually already know what the plot is, because the plot is just a very large idea. It's the details that I have to write down. How do we get from point A to point B? If Steven has to be in this location for this plot to happen, then what would be the most sensible way for him to arrive there? And of course, is there anything else I can do along the way that would tie well into the story? All of this thinking usually doesn't take place in front of a computer. It usually takes place within my brain, while I'm driving, or when I'm about to fall asleep, or when I'm washing dishes. These small moments of silence are the perfect fertile ground for ideas. But what comes next is probably more important. Storyboarding. I personally really like the format of the original Steven Universe, that is, no script. I start by storyboarding the comic instead of writing the lines. I draw loose sketches and panels about what happens. I ask myself, what needs to be shown in this panel to make the meaning of it clear? What does the audience need to see in order to understand what sort of location they're in? What angle works best for helping the reader feel like they're looking in the same direction as the character? And as I'm going about the storyboarding process, I throw in some lines. Sometimes I'll sketch half a comic without a single line of script, and then I'll go back and fill everything in as necessary. Sometimes I draw and add lines panel by panel. Just really depends on what I'm feeling. The script is the most fluid part of it. It changes constantly. I throw down lines and crumple them up 3 to 5 times on average before settling on what feels right. Some people may balk at this, but for me, this flexibility is what allows the comic's dialogue to flow smoothly. In the end, the storyboarding process is probably what takes the longest. This is me actively writing the story. The way the characters look, the way they're facing, what the lighting is, what the framing is, all those things are arguably more important than what lines the characters say. And often, the visuals are what stays with your audience the most. At least in my experience. I know for a fact that many casual readers hardly even look at the speech bubbles, and instead treat my comic like a picture book. Why else would I get so many asks about the things that were directly disproven in the comic's dialogue? And yes, usually I do end up sketching storyboarding all in one file. You can judge me all you want. I often just also do a full episode in a single file as well, with about 5 to 6 layers per panel. Look, we all have our own way of doing things, alright? Lineup, tones, and color. Another very common question I often get is, how long does it take you to finish the comics? But this is a nonsensical question. It's like asking someone, how long does it take you to go hiking? It depends, right? On where you're going, how far away it is, what the weather's like. For the most part, the length of my work time on a comic depends on the length of the episode. So if I storyboard an episode with 40 panels, that will obviously take me twice as long as an episode with 20 panels. But I also have to do line art and add tones, which adds some spice to my life. Line art is my favorite thing about art. I love doing it. It's meditative. I don't often go very hard on the line art in my comics because I don't need a great amount of detail to relay the concepts. Steven Universe was an animated show, which means that adding a lot of detail to the characters' outfits is guaranteed to make your animators kill you in your sleep. Steven Universe favors simplicity and shapes to get their point across, and I try to follow suit. However, depending on the setting of the comic, I may need to put more time into the tones and shading. If it's a simple comic with a basic setting like Beach City, I rarely bother with dramatic lighting or heavy values. But for more intense episodes, which are either more complex or require stage lighting to set the mood, I try to put more time and effort into giving it that feeling. After all, I think we can all agree that this looks way more dramatic than this. Leaving it. This may be a weird thing to add in the lineup, but to me, leaving it has been crucial as a step when drawing comics. I know from experience how easy it is to be a perfectionist when it comes to your art. You want it to be good, you want it to be as good as it can be, and you begin to go back over details, constantly fixing things, constantly making small adjustments and redrawing. And I'm here to tell you that's not part of any process. That's just your anxiety. Remember that thing I said about how not all ideas are good, and how quantity breeds quality? This is about that. Not every comic I put finishing touches on and send out into the world ends up being a winner. Some of them are honestly kind of meh, and I know it. So why don't I go back and obsessively fix them to be better? Why don't I return to my older comics and completely redraw them now that I've improved? Because it isn't worth it. For one thing, I do this mainly for fun, not for profit. My comic is entirely free to read online, and I'm not beholden to any middle manager telling me that I need to make the red arrow on the graph point up. And for another thing, it's fine to allow things to be less than great. Sometimes comics are just okay, and that's fine. If they serve a purpose, if they allow you to tell a story, and if you had fun drawing them, you can leave them be. I'm not ashamed of my older drawings, nor do I think they're bad. I drew those comics very hurriedly, with more focus on how fun it was. And it's because of that very thing that I'm still here now, drawing more stuff, instead of having been burnt out 3 years ago. So that's the last step in my process. Leave it. I plan, I sketch, I line, I add sparkles, and I leave it be. The last part of this process is, obviously, posting, but I won't bore you with the details of that. I will say that, in terms of size, I typically draw on a 2000 pixel square canvas for the standard comics, and for the season finale, it was done on a 2000 by 4000 pixel rectangle. I rarely post in this size, though. After the comic is finished, I resize everything into 900 pixel squares and save them to a separate posting folder. Currently, I post on Tapas, which has a very simple system, and I appreciate this. If you want to read my comic in chronological order, please do it on Tapas. I'll leave a link down in the description below. And for the gritty details, I can tell you that I use a Huon 23 canvas tablet, and my program of choice is Medibang Pro, which is free to download. That wasn't a commercial segment or anything, but this is. My friend is designing some awesome Pokemon-themed pins based off Mimikyu and its imagined variations, and is planning to launch the Kickstarter soon. If this sounds like something you'd like, check it out at the link below and maybe give it a follow. I don't give a dongle if you like or subscribe, but if you want more videos like this, please let me know, because I'm not a mind reader, and unless you tell people what sort of content you enjoy, you will not be getting that content. Cheers!